Many people try to quiet the noise around them. They reduce commitments, silence notifications, seek moments of pause, and yet still feel that something remains restless inside. The external noise diminishes, but the mind stays agitated, filled with thoughts that find no rest. Billy Graham observed that this conflict is not in the excess of sounds in the world, but in the inner movement that continues even when everything seems silent. This is a reflection on trying to calm what is outside while the true noise remains within. The conflict begins when a person realizes that external silence does not produce the expected effect. Distractions decrease, the environment becomes organized, stimuli are reduced. Still, the mind remains active. Thoughts arise in sequence without a clear pause, creating a sense of restlessness that does not depend on what is happening around them. Many people believe that mental exhaustion comes only from excessive external noise. Work, notifications, demands, conversations, information, and indeed all of this weighs heavily. But there comes a moment when these sources are removed and the discomfort remains. That is when confusion arises. If everything is calmer outside, why is it not calm inside? This inner noise is not usually identified as a conflict. It presents itself as mild restlessness, difficulty concentrating, accelerated thinking. The person feels the need to do something, think about something, resolve something, even when there is no immediate demand. Rest does not happen because the mind cannot find a stopping point. This state becomes common precisely because it is functional. The person learns to live with it. They produce, respond, decide, organize themselves. The inner noise accompanies everything, like a constant background. It does not interrupt life, it merely runs through it. And for that reason it is rarely questioned. Many people try to resolve this discomfort by adjusting the exterior, changing routines, seeking more silence, organizing the environment, creating moments of pause. These changes help, but they do not reach the root of the problem. Inner noise is not born only from an excess of stimuli, but from the continuous habit of keeping the mind occupied. This conflict also draws little external attention. The person appears calm, organized, functional. Inside, however, there is a sense of constant movement. Thoughts about the past return. Future worries anticipate themselves. Ideas connect without rest. There is no clear line between real necessity and mental habit. Over time, this inner noise comes to be interpreted as part of one's personality. The person believes they are naturally restless, anxious, always thinking too much, and so they stop questioning the state in which they live. The noise becomes normalized. This conflict deepens because the mind is rarely without a task. Even in moments of pause, it looks for something to occupy itself. Planning, reviewing, anticipating, analyzing. Silence becomes uncomfortable not because of what it reveals, but because it interrupts a pattern that has become automatic. The result is a persistent sense of mental fatigue, even in calm environments. The person is sitting still, yet feels that something inside continues to run. There is no external urgency, but there is internal pressure, and this creates a tension that is difficult to explain. This is the central conflict, trying to calm the noise outside and realizing that the true noise does not come from the world, but from within, a noise made of continuous thoughts, diffuse worries, and mental movements that find no pause. Billy Graham observed this inner noise as one of the clearest signs of a life lived in constant internal motion. For him, restlessness of the mind was not merely the result of external stimuli, but the consequence of a deep habit of keeping the consciousness always occupied. He noticed that many people sought silence around them, believing it would bring immediate rest. They reduced commitments, distanced themselves from noise, tried to create calmer environments. But in doing so, they encountered something unexpected. The noise did not cease. It simply became more noticeable. Billy Graham understood that the problem was not the presence of thoughts, but the inability to let them pass without following them. The mind becomes accustomed to reacting to every idea, every memory, every possibility, and in this process, it loses the ability to remain in quietness. For him, this restlessness was not a personal failure, nor a sign of lack of control. It was a reflection of an inner life that had lost contact with silence. When everything is thought through, analyzed, and anticipated, there is no space left for mental rest. Billy Graham observed that this inner noise often intensifies precisely when the exterior calms down. When distractions decrease, the flow of thoughts becomes more noticeable. Not because it has increased, but because it is no longer muffled. He also noticed that many people confuse silence with the absence of sound. But true rest, in his view, does not depend solely on the environment. It involves a different relationship with one's own thoughts, a way of not being carried away by every movement of the mind. Billy Graham did not treat this theme as a technique or an exercise. He did not propose quick methods to calm the mind. He simply pointed out that inner quiet does not arise automatically when the world becomes silent. It requires a different, deeper attention to what is happening within. For him, the greatest risk was not the noise itself, but the distancing from one's own consciousness. When the mind never settles, a person loses the ability to perceive what they truly feel. Constant noise blocks access to deeper layers of experience. This perspective is not accompanied by judgment. Billy Graham did not see restlessness as a flaw. He saw it as a sign that the inner life needed to be listened to more carefully, not to be controlled, but to be acknowledged. He observed that when a person tries to force the mind into silence, the noise increases. When they try to ignore it, it intensifies. Inner silence is not imposed. It is built through a more conscious relationship with the flow of one's own thoughts. This understanding inspires trust because it does not promise immediate relief. It simply recognizes that calming the external world does not guarantee inner quiet, and that the real work is not outside, but in the way the mind is inhabited. In modern life, external noise rarely stops completely. Even when the environment seems calm, the mind remains exposed to constant stimuli. Information, comparisons, decisions, expectations. Physical silence exists, but mental silence becomes increasingly rare. Many people try to deal with this by organizing the outside. They create more controlled routines, reduce commitments, seek quieter environments. These changes help, but they do not resolve the core of the problem. Inner noise is not born only from excess stimuli, but from the habit of keeping the mind always in a state of response. Billy Graham observed that the current pace encourages fragmented attention. The mind is trained to jump quickly from one thought to another, from one concern to the next. Even in moments of pause, it continues anticipating, reviewing, analyzing. External rest finds no internal counterpart. Work contributes to this state. Even outside working hours, the mind remains engaged. Unfinished tasks, pending decisions, future expectations take up space. The body is still, but the mind keeps working, and this constant movement creates a sense of restlessness that is difficult to switch off. Modern distractions also reinforce this pattern. They offer momentary relief, but not quiet. They fill time, but they do not calm the mind. When they stop, the inner noise returns with greater force, as if it had merely been waiting for space. Billy Graham saw that in this context, many people begin to confuse mental activity with real necessity. Thinking becomes automatic. Solving becomes compulsive. The mind rarely experiences a state of genuine rest. This inner noise shows itself in small signs: difficulty remaining in silence, discomfort when not doing anything, a feeling that something needs to be resolved, even without knowing what it is. The person feels the need to occupy the mind to avoid an undefined discomfort. Modern life also encourages the idea that inner silence is unproductive. Stopping feels like wasted time. Slowing down generates guilt, and so the noise is maintained not only by habit, but by fear of what might arise when it ceases. Billy Graham observed that this state creates a deep fatigue, not only physical but mental and emotional. The person lives in constant alert, even without a real threat. The inner system rarely finds rest. This is the current scenario. The world may become quieter, but the mind remains busy. Inner noise becomes part of everyday life, so common that many no longer notice how much it interferes with the ability to feel presence, peace, and clarity. It is at this point that reflection needs to slow down again, because there is a kind of restlessness that only reveals itself when everything seems calm. And it is there that inner noise usually becomes more evident. There are moments when the world finally grows quiet. The day ends, tasks stop, external voices fade, the environment seems calm. Still, something inside continues to move. In this silence, the inner noise becomes more noticeable. Thoughts arise without clear direction. Memories appear without warning. Small worries gain space. The mind does not rest simply because the environment is peaceful. Billy Graham observed that many people avoid this moment without realizing it, not out of fear of silence itself, but of what it reveals. When there are no distractions, the inner noise is no longer muffled. It shows itself as restlessness, as mental agitation, as difficulty in simply being. Late nights intensify this process. The body asks for rest, but the mind remains active. There is no external urgency, but there is constant movement inside. Thinking becomes automatic. Stopping feels impossible. This silence does not accuse. It does not demand answers. It simply exposes a pattern, the habit of living with the mind always occupied, the continuous effort to control, organize, anticipate. When everything outside stops, this effort does not know how to cease. Billy Graham saw this moment as a point of inner honesty. Not because it brings solutions, but because it removes the noises that were hiding the real one. Silence does not create restlessness. It only makes it visible. There is no need to interpret this state. It does not ask for immediate correction. It simply exists. And perhaps that is what makes it uncomfortable, because there is no clear action that makes it disappear. There is a sense of suspension in this space, between one thought and another, between what has already been done and what might still be done. It is there that many realize that inner noise does not depend on the world around them. This moment does not resolve the conflict, but it reveals it. And revealing is already different from simply continuing without noticing. When inner noise persists for long periods, it begins to change how a person experiences life, not in a dramatic way, but continuously. The mind rarely finds rest, and this creates a permanent state of mild, almost imperceptible tension that accompanies the entire day. Billy Graham observed that this constant inner noise makes something essential difficult: presence. The person is physically in one place, but mentally in many, thinking about what has passed, what might happen, what should be different. The present moment loses strength. Life happens, but it is lived in haste. Over time, this mental agitation interferes with the perception of one's own emotions. Feeling becomes confused. The mind interprets everything before the experience is truly lived. There is little space for inner silence, and without silence, emotions do not find clarity. This state also creates a specific kind of exhaustion. It is not just physical fatigue, it is an exhaustion of attention. The person feels constantly switched on, even when there is no real demand. Resting the body is not enough when the mind does not slow down. Billy Graham saw that in this scenario, many people begin to avoid silence altogether. Any pause becomes uncomfortable. Being without stimulation creates restlessness. And so inner noise is maintained not only by habit, but by fear of the emptiness that may arise when it stops. This continuous noise also affects how decisions are made. Overthinking creates insecurity. Each choice is reviewed countless times. The fear of making mistakes increases. The mind tries to control everything, but ends up producing more instability. As time passes, the person may feel that they have lost contact with a state of genuine calm, not because they are never in silence, but because silence is no longer a place of rest. It has become merely the absence of external stimuli, not inner quiet. Billy Graham understood that this wear was not a sign of personal failure. It was the consequence of an inner life that finds no space to slow down. When mental noise becomes constant, it begins to shape how a person perceives the world and themselves. Ignoring this state does not dissolve it. It only normalizes it. The person begins to believe that living with an agitated mind is a natural part of life, that always thinking is a sign of responsibility. And so the noise stops being questioned. This deeper reflection does not offer quick answers. It simply reveals the cost of living without inner pause, a cost that does not appear in fulfilled commitments, but that weighs on the experience of being present, of feeling clarity, and of finding some inner rest. Perhaps inner noise is not something that disappears when the world becomes silent. It may remain there, even when everything outside seems organized, calm, controlled. And this does not mean that something is wrong. It simply means that there is an inner movement that cannot be resolved through external adjustments. Billy Graham never treated this restlessness as a problem to be eliminated quickly. For him, trying to silence inner noise by force usually produces even more agitation. Noise does not diminish when it is fought. It transforms when it is no longer ignored. It is possible that this video has not offered a clear way to silence the mind, and that is intentional, because true noise does not fade through quick techniques or immediate decisions. It asks for attention, not control, presence, not urgency. Perhaps you have noticed that even in calm environments, something inside continues to move, thoughts that arise without invitation, worries that find no rest. A sense that the mind never fully settles. Recognizing this is already different from simply trying to suppress it. I suggest that you subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you continue to follow reflections that move at this same pace. Human themes observed with depth, grounded in the ideas of Billy Graham, without ready-made formulas and without quick promises of relief. If you wish, leave a comment. It can be something simple. A word or a short sentence about when you notice that external noise fades, but the inner noise remains. There is no need to explain too much. Perhaps the most important thing is not to silence everything now, but to notice how you respond when the world becomes quiet. Some changes do not begin when the noise disappears, but when it is no longer fought. And perhaps that is what this reflection proposes. Not to force the mind into silence, not to flee from the noise, but to remain attentive to what is happening within, even when, on the outside, everything seems silent.